Hello, and welcome to 401 Richmond's online panel discussion, Old Building, New Vision, Seeing the Future at 401. My name is Jennifer Bogle, and I'm the Communications and Community Animator here at 401, coming to you today from our third floor meeting room. This panel will consider the forced need of online community in a pandemic and the resulting benefits of a hyper-connected creative sector. The discussion will explore how cultural producers have embraced technology to continue to deliver inspiring content, what accessibility means in the digital sphere, and how partnerships can fortify communities and strengthen connectivity. Moderated by William Huffman and including guest speaker Patrick Tobin, the Director of Arts and Culture Services for the City of Toronto, the panel also includes perspectives from Chris Chin, Operations and Festival Manager for the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival, Simone Carpio, Board Member of Tangled Arts and Disability, and Todd Hofley, Director of Property Relations for Beanfield Metroconnect. To kick things off, we're going to show you a short video about this innovative arts and culture hub here in downtown Toronto.
Built in 1899 by the McDonald Manufacturing Company, the four-story 401 Richmond Street complex was designed by architect John Wilson Siddall to be the first factory for lithography on tinware in Canada. The company prospered for almost 70 years, but after its closure in 1967, 401 Richmond became neglected. That was until a watershed moment in 1994. Comprising more than 250,000 square feet of space, Margaret Zeidler envisioned an urban renewal opportunity that would reclaim the building's original architecture while creating a mixed-use cultural hub and home for a diverse pool of tenants. Today, 401 Richmond Street is an iconic address, a cultural beacon, one that is guided by a synergy of community, culture, and commerce. More than just affordable space in Toronto's urban core, 401 is a family of creative small businesses and not-for-profit organizations working alongside and with each other.
Hi, Jennifer, thank you very much for the invitation. So I want to thank everybody for including me in today's discussion, and particularly so as 401 Richmond is among my favorite buildings in the world. And having just watched that clip and the role that Margie Zeidler has played in terms of incubating so many for-profit, not-for-profit cultural enterprise in this city over such a long time, and showing a model of private sector engagement with culture that we need to replicate more. Happy to be here virtually in 401 Richmond to be talking to your community.
Wonderful. And I didn't get a chance to introduce you, so we'll do things slightly backward. I'm very happy. Patrick Tobin is a longtime friend and supporter of 401 Richmond. Given his understanding and appreciation of public and private spaces that prioritize arts and culture, we're fortunate that Patrick oversees municipal cultural policy, cultural grants, and the delivery of city-led events like Nuit Blanche. Prior to joining the City of Toronto, Pat spent 18 years with federal government working in areas such as culture, civic engagement, and economic development. Outside of his government roles, Pat has worked with the Maytree Foundation on newcomer integration and the Inuit Art Foundation on expanding markets for Inuit culture. Thanks again, Pat. We feel very fortunate to have you here with us. And I know we'll have some questions for you as well.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. And next time we do this, we'll do it on the rooftop garden.
Oh, it'd be fantastic. It's right outside the window for me right now. I can see it.
Great.
Okay. So now we're going to get started with our panel discussion today. Please let me introduce you to our moderator, William Huffman. William Huffman is an arts administrator, curator, educator, and writer with a history of extensive involvement on both local and international cultural fronts. William has spent a large portion of the last few decades in 401 since his time as director at A Space Gallery more than 25 years ago. He manages the 401 Richmond Career Launcher Prize Residency, delivers our building tours, and is 401's curator for Nuit Blanche, among much more cultural programming delivered in the building throughout the year. William, thank you so much for moderating our panel today. Over to you.
You're muted. There we go. Thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction, and always very generous, but also reminds me how old I am. 25 years old, 25 years involvement with the building, 26 years perhaps. Pat, such a deeply inspiring person, encouraging to hear all of your words as a leading thinker and a change maker in the cultural sphere, particularly related to city building through arts and culture. So a big thank you to all that you do. It's always a pleasure to work with 401 family. And again, I've been doing this now for 26 years, assisting with all the activities, some of the activities that go on in the building. I greatly appreciate everything that the building does, both locally and beyond. So again, thank you to the entire team at 401. And of course, thanks again, Jennifer introduced, and I'm going to do it one more time, our esteemed panelists, Simone Carpio from Tangled Arts. They're located at Studio 122 in the 401 complex. Chris Chin from Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival in Studio 448, also in 401 Richmond, and Todd Hofley from Beanfield Metroconnect, who isn't a 401 tenant, but Beanfield is a valued connectivity partner. And so, in fact, you're in the building all the time, virtually, by way of the connections that you provide us. So thank you so much. Now, those of you who know what these guys do, we have a great appreciation for it. For those who are participating as audience in today's discussion, who will be introduced to what you do, I'm sure that appreciation will grow. And once again, thank you for all of the great work. And I also want to just thank everybody who's participating in the virtual ether, all of our audience members from all over the place. And again, thank you for spending time with us. I know we could all be doing other things now that the restrictions are easing, but I really appreciated that you're spending time with us today. So we'll get on with the panel discussion and just a bit of a preamble. So we've had a remarkable last 16 months with lots of activities either entirely canceled or changed in so many profound ways. We've had to rethink how we get things done. I mean, all of the stuff that we thought we could do, we now have to do differently because of a lot of the restrictions and the fact that we can't be face-to-face. So technology is playing a much bigger role in everything that we do. Many of us in the onset of the pandemic honestly had no idea, me being one of them, that I would be able to do my job or to accomplish the goals that were set out long before we knew this was going to happen. And, like a lot of people, I reluctantly adopted technology and virtual connectivity as a means to stay active, stay relevant, ultimately to stay accessible to our various stakeholders, audiences, communities. And I know that term accessibility and access is nuanced, and I'm really excited to hear from each of your perspectives what that means. But I do want to say again that the subtext of the discussion is really about connectivity and technology and how that's allowed us over this last 16 trying months to continue doing what we're doing. And I think, we'd like to talk a little bit about the new uses that we found for technology, the future opportunities, and of course, the challenges that we've all been facing with trying to do everything this way, so to speak. And so with that preamble, perhaps I can ask that each of you provide a brief introduction. I mean, we've given, who you are, name and place, but it would be great for you to talk a little bit about, yourselves and the organization you represent, and also to give us some initial thoughts on the subject at hand, sort of a high-level observation on some of the things you've experienced from your, again, unique perspectives over the last 16 months and how it relates to our subject. And then what we've got, I've got some specific questions for you later on. So again, the operative is at high level, and then we can get into some of the more the minutia later on in the discussion. Now, for our audience members, there will be a Q&A at the end of the panel discussion. So post your questions for our panelists into the YouTube chat. Pat Tobin will be hanging in for a little while longer, and if you've got questions for him, post them in the YouTube chat, and we'll get to them as we move through the rest of the program. Now, I know, Pat, did you have any words before we get into the discussion?
No, you've got an amazing panel here on accessibility. The three questions that you posed about what changed, what does it mean for accessibility, what does it mean for community partnerships, are great framing questions. I'd offer just really briefly off the top to that first question. The city has a strange position as both a producer for things like Nuit Blanche and Doors Open that also had to go virtual like everybody else. And then we have a relationship through funding or policy with the great majority of arts not-for-profits in the city. So we were able to observe what was happening there. And I'll just say really briefly that as I was thinking about how to report on our observation as a producer, every pro I had sort of had a con on the other side. So one, we were able to bring down access issues as they relate to physical mobility, geography, but we compounded digital divide access issues. We were able to put more people out there, but those people were immediately competing against the Met and everybody else in a really flat online environment. We had to rush out like everybody, and then we had to work carefully to catch up to make sure that things were sticky and we sustained people's ability to stay online, and then converted that to income. And that perhaps caught up a little bit late. And then on the other side, I think as you get into collaboration, we did see some gaps early on. Everybody went out quickly, and Toronto's art sector really distinguished itself, I think, nationally in terms of how nimble and quick it was. But we sort of did so at points lacking the partnerships, particularly with organizations of scale, that might have contributed to monetization and sustainability. So I don't think the story's yet written on exactly what happened, but this is a great place to perhaps start writing that draft.
And, you know, Pat, just as a quick observation for me, I was involved in creating some programming for 401 up for Nuit Blanche. And of course, you know, when you have a 12-hour event with 1 million people running around the city that turns into a 12-hour event of programming online, I mean, I have to say, it was challenging, certainly, for us to understand how to do that technically and, you know, conceptually. But on the other hand, really tremendous, the audiences we were able to access, and the kind of creative thinking and the possibilities we were able to do in the virtual realm that we wouldn't be able to do in an edifice. So really fascinating. And again, what did I learn from that is that there are lots of really interesting things that you can do in the virtual realm that you want to continue doing, even though you may have an opportunity to have another 1 million people in the streets at some point. So I guess thank you for your support on that one.
Well, thanks you guys for sticking with particularly Dr. Julie Nagam, our artistic director, for last year. And Julie will be back with bigger and better Nuit. So more to come on that.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being with us. Thanks for sticking around too, because I'm sure we're going to get some questions for you. And so we'll go to the panelists now. And as I mentioned to you, you know, little intro, and then give us a bit of a high-level overview of your last 16 months and some thoughtful observations and things that you'd like to share with us. And so why don't we start with Simone?
I was muted. So I'm the chair on the board for Tangled Arts, and I started out as an intern, and then graduated to being I love it so much that I wanted to be on the board. So Tangled has not exactly tried to recreate a gallery in a digital space per se. Because we wanted to be intentional and not just jump into creating a usual space digitally, because our exhibitions are much more physical. You know, it has a lot to do with physical, tactile imaging, because we have our audience are deaf, mad, blind, and so we wanted to ensure that to maintain that integrity. And so in doing so, we connected with Deaf Interior exhibition, where we had 6 artists that presented their work. And originally we wanted it to be in a phone booth, and then it graduated. That Zoom layout was not going to work for us, and so we decided to do it in a website type way. So, and that's new. We've never done that before, and it worked out pretty well.
Fascinating, and your observation that you didn't want to recreate that gallery experience because it's kind of impossible for the ways that you do things and the goals that you need to accomplish. So that makes complete sense. And I've got questions for you later on, some more pointed ones for a bit more detail on what you were talking about. So we're going to move on to Chris. You're up next.
Hey, so Real Asian is Canada's largest and oldest Pan-Asian cinematic presenter. We have been in existence since 1997, and we're part of an organizational cluster on the 4th floor of 401 called the Commons. We made the collective decision to shut down the Commons in mid-March of 2020. And that was more than 8 months before Real Asian would be holding our 24th edition of the festival. And at that point, nobody knew how long the shutdown would last. March turned to April, and our colleagues at Hot Docs announced that they were going to be presented virtually. They were the first of the big festivals to go digital. And by June, Real Asian had decided that we were going to go digital as well. And that was earlier than most of the other fall festivals' colleagues. And this early decision was crucial in giving us the time needed to carry out the transition to an all-online festival. And thanks to this lead time, we were able to mount a well-organized and well-received festival.
That's great, and big congratulations, Chris, on the successes that Real Asian has had in its first virtual installment. You will do another this year, and we'll talk a little more about that as we move into the discussion. And Todd, you're up now.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. So for us, Beanfield, Metroconnect, this hit us pretty fast and it hit us pretty hard, like everybody. And then as kind of the backbone to so many of these conversations and these opportunities. And I couldn't agree with you more, Patrick. The resilience and the innovation that we've seen in the Toronto arts community is honestly something that's pretty incredible. I myself have been a multi-hyphenate artist for 25 years and just kind of, I wouldn't say I've left the fold, but I'm enjoying, trying to create connection, which is what all art is about doing, right? At its very basic level, whether that's visual art, whether that's the performing arts, it's all about creating connection. And I found kind of an interesting new home here at Beanfield, working on the backbone of all of that. And we oftentimes take for granted how that works. And don't even know really how it works. Sometimes I make joke and say that we traffic in light, but sometimes that makes it even more confusing because people don't understand all these little data packets. I know I certainly didn't. So we pivoted pretty well to kind of like working at home. But one of the things, Beanfield was founded on the notion of equity. And one of the things, as amazing as all of these innovations have been, is that it's also shown that the digital divide has grown greater. There's having connectivity at a place of work, but there's also having connectivity at home. And whether that connectivity is stable and reliable and allows you to engage with these types of arts organizations online is also a really big component of this. So we have definitely been focused in terms of a lot of our kind of environmental and social governance and things in how do we support that? How do we make sure that the organizations and then the individuals who participate in those organizations, have the connectivity that they can rely on, and that they can rely on in a how shall I say it, a very fair way from a monetary standpoint, because that's also a huge barrier to participation for a lot of the organizations that we're talking about. As we know, artists don't make a lot of money. They do this because this is something they are called to do. They do this because this is something they have a passion for, and they can't really do anything else. It's that much of a drive, and I feel that. So I've been really proud of kind of the things that we've done to support this. But I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I'd love to hear more about from Simone about how do you bridge that divide when so much of the art that you're working on is tactile for the people that are involved. And Chris, also, what else has been going on with your collaborations with other, organizations, and honestly, I'd love to know how we can help support those types of things even more.
Well said, Todd. Thank you very much. And I'm going to loop back to you actually, because I'm reminded every time I see a Beanfield truck on the street that is some more of that light being distributed throughout the city, via the network that you guys are building. And in a way, it's the ability for us to be able to get this stuff out to a growing audience because of what you're doing. And however, it's interesting because it's only recently that any of us have really discovered that backbone that you're talking about, the one that is taken for granted, that I like to call invisible. We're content producers, and that's kind of what we do. I mean, I've started teaching, early on in the pandemic on Zoom, and then the power goes out of my apartment, and I'm suddenly profoundly understanding how precarious all this stuff is, as technology being the thing that carries it. So is there anything, I'm really fascinated again as a tech Luddite, but somebody who actually makes things that go onto this thing called, the virtual, network and internet and all of those things. Can you tell us what was some of the interesting moments that happened over the last 16 months? Like, as a company that does this professionally, like, did you have to deeply invest into new technologies? Did you have to retrain people? Did you have to, like, some of the stuff that we wouldn't see that helps us to appreciate more, the services that you offer?
Absolutely. Just very briefly, the story of Beanfield itself, small little startup in Liberty Village. And as I said, was started from equity because none of the big players had any interest in bringing out connectivity to Liberty Village, which is really how Beanfield was born. There were all these entrepreneurs, many of whom in the creative industry, and we know Liberty Village has become quite a creative hub, who just couldn't get the connectivity. And so from that point, almost 30 years ago, over the course of the past year, we've been on an unbelievably huge explosion. We have more than doubled the size of our company. And part of that, and we don't think about this when you see the Beanfield trucks, as you mentioned, there are people who have to go and dig holes in the ground and lay fiber optic cable and fill those holes up and, repair the concrete. And they're all participating in their own way to enable something like this to happen. So we certainly had to pivot. We had to ensure that the backbone was more stable than ever. So there were definitely upgrades that were necessary so that there are redundancies in the system. One of the things we're really proud of with our company is how low downtime we have. You do not get very many outages with Beanfield. And that, of course, helps keep these types of things stable. Even if one of us were to drop off here, it could be a big deal, or God forbid, the entire thing goes down from a single internet connection. Even if this is going wirelessly through our house, it's still going into a fiber optic cable that's going under the ground that is then shooting on highways of light all across the planet. And so making sure that works, is kind of our job, and we're really proud to do it. But yeah, it's been a wild ride for the past year.
And also a question for you about, the support that you guys provide to the community. I mean, you are, as I mentioned earlier, a valued connectivity partner with 401, making things possible that wouldn't have been possible because of that connectivity in the building, in very strategic places in the building where we need it. You could tell us a little more about the support programs, that you have for a lot of the organizations that in the city that you're affiliated with.
Yeah, well, we're really proud of that kind of stuff, and honestly consider ourselves fortunate to be able to offer it. As I said, we've always been a huge supporter of the arts, so it's not just places like 401, but we have, and I think we actually help provide connectivity for a good portion of the tenants at 401 on top of 401, the entity itself. I believe both Chris and Simone have Beanfield. Yeah, so there you go. But yeah, we also support the Artscape Daniels Launchpad, the Stacked Market, which is a really cool concept at the foot of Bathurst there, the Bentway, Distillery District, Regent Park. We offer a lot of support for Regent Park, and we had to pivot those types of support because sometimes it would be directed at, a main portion, a main supplier, for example, of programming in Regent Park. But when that wasn't able anymore, we then decided to redistribute those funds to smaller artists who might need the support. Sistema, which is an amazing after-school music program, we help support that. And of course, connectivity only matters if you have the hardware to support it. And certainly in underserved communities, we see that that's also a huge issue in terms of the digital divide. So making sure that the laptops and the computers, even the cell phones at times, at times are there and are available, is really important. And so with Sistema, we did that because there were, I think there are over 300 students right now who do that after school, and they didn't all have the hardware that they needed and able to be able to have their music lessons. And so we pivoted in that way as well.
That is terrific. Amazing to hear all of the work that you guys are doing. And we're going to move on to Simone. And just to pick up with a couple of the threads that you offered when you were talking earlier. So yes, not recreating the gallery space. I mean, sure. And because, of course, gallery space is generally characterized as a place of exchange in real life, a place of social interaction in real life. And I know that for Tangled, it's really important to facilitate those connections with the community. And you've got such a terrific group of people, A, working at Tangled, but B, also you've got a really dedicated group, stakeholders and audience and all of that. How did you maintain that engagement over the last 16 months? Oh.
Muted. Okay. So one of the things that we've done is that we're really proud of is Crip Times podcast, which is an entirely new project for Tangled. And it was produced in partnership with Bodies in Transition and hosted by Andrew Gerzer's Disability After Dark platform. It felt really good to done that in that moment, because we wanted to replicate sort of like a serendipitous way that our community engages critically with issues of disability and access, disability art and access, and also with Crip politics. And it felt like a great way to maintain the connection and to draw new audiences as well through the podcast platform. But it's not like your typical podcast. Try saying podcast 3 times in a row. I'm tripping over my words. It has also been a way for us to reset common podcast practices. For instance, we recognized our labor, the labor of our guests who took part in the podcast and the conversations, and we did that by paying each participant's artist fees, and making each guest co-producer of their own content. Which is not a common practice, as you know, for podcasts. So that's one of the ways that we try to stay connected in that way. We've also are looking at revamping our website. We are now on Instagram. And so that's been a big deal, where we're posting a lot of things on Instagram, if you follow us on Instagram. And so that's one of the many ways that we've been trying to stay connected digitally.
And are you finding, I mean, just in retrospect, and I think we're talking about a recap basically now, and we'll get to a discussion soon about the future, what the future might hold. But in terms of what you've observed, has technology, are there aspects of technology that you are going to maintain, as part of the programming or a delivery system, or are we really waiting just to get back to Tangled gallery space?
No, we've learned a lot through the last year and a half and a bit. Like, we've learned a lot through the podcast that we've done, through connecting. Another thing that we, through connecting with different artists and stuff. And some of those things we wanna maintain, but and also consider how we can make it pivot to tactiling more in the digital realm. But in essence, we want to really get back to being in person. One of the ideas that we were thinking of was, maybe offering bookings virtually, and have people be able to review the artwork or exhibit that way. So yeah, we've learned a lot, and we've learned that we can do it. It can be done, and it's exciting.
Yeah. Not to say, when you talk about the tactile nature of the exhibitions at Tangled, it was always a thrill to go to those exhibitions. It's the only place on the planet, any art gallery, that you can actually touch the stuff, and you're encouraged to. So
yes,
always tons of fun.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Simone. And
You're
now,
welcome.
Chris, we're going to go to you. And I mean, you're the senior statesperson at it seems now these days. I mean, you've seen how many festivals and growth and all kinds of challenges. And the latest now is, of course, moving a film festival online, which, I don't know, a year and a half ago would be unthinkable, to tell you the truth, and totally undesirable. But due to circumstances, suddenly we're doing that. And I mean, and it's interesting because the whole nature, the character of festivals is, you go to screenings and then you go to a gala and then you engage at a networking event. How on earth did all of that happen virtually? I'm dying to know.
Well, we made the decision very early on to make all of our screenings in the VOD format, so that we found that people consume media online in a different way than they consume media in person. So instead of trying to simulate a in-person festival where the screening happens only at one time and you have to be there for it, we pivoted to make our selections more like the way people consume media online. So they do it at their own pace, asynchronously, and at their leisure. But in order to bring an idea of a sense of festival, what we did is we had our Q&As as live events, as appointment viewing. So you could watch the film at any time, but you had to tune in for a live Q&A. And we had a schedule of 5 to 6 live events every day. They were Q&As, they were artist talks, they were industry session panels. And so we had a very comprehensive collection of live events that gave people the feeling, oh, this is a festival. This is something that's happening. And we had people tuning in from all over the world and saying, this feels like a festival. It really does. And yet they had the same ability to consume the media in the way that they're accustomed to in an online presentation at their own pace. But there was still a schedule of live events that they could tune into. And we reduced the number of networking events and kind of special events to 2. And that was our festival launch and our award ceremony. And both of these were broadcast live. Our festival launch was a coast-to-coast DJ party. We had different DJs and drag performers from Toronto and New York and Vancouver. And it went on for 6 hours. And we had people tuning in from all over the world and at different times, because it was going on for so long that they had an opportunity to tune in from whenever it was convenient for them to tune in. Our award ceremony was pre-recorded, but broadcast live. And so there was, we were able to simulate a bit of live interaction in that when winners were on screen, we were able to drop their bios in the chat, and we were able to drop ticket links to their films. And so we did the award ceremony very early on in the festival calendar so that we could promote these films as award-winning films. And we broadcast live to Facebook Live, Instagram, and YouTube. And we got very good response from that. So that was a really good experience for us. But we're glad that we pre-recorded the award ceremony, because there was a lot of switching of parties and things. So we just decided that it was way too difficult to do live with all these people coming in from all over the world. So we had winners from Korea and Taiwan and Indonesia. So the only way we could do that was possibly to do it was pre-recorded. but it was broadcast live at a certain time. And then it was available for watching afterwards.
And it's interesting because just some of the observations, colleagues who are filmmakers, talking about, how much of an important mentorship opportunity participation is in festivals. And I know that Real Asian introduces many new filmmakers to the world and also provides the stability and the support to encourage them to continue making work. Can you talk a little bit about some of the allocations of technology that were made in order to allow those things to happen, or is that something that's still being worked out?
Well, one of the things that we did is we created a Discord server this year. And that was an opportunity for filmmakers and audience members alike to mingle in real time. And we called it our digital theater lobby because we were trying to give a space for people that simulated what you do in the festival lobby after the film. You sit and you talk with other people about the film that you just watched. And so we wanted to create this in an online space. So we created a Discord server where people can talk about the films that they saw online. And so what it turned into was it was a space for Q&As to continue. After the hour-long live Q&A, the filmmakers would all be interested in talking to one another, and sometimes we didn't have enough time for audience questions to be fully answered. So we just ported it to the Discord, and the conversations continued after that. So that was we found was a really good way of using technology to create a resource for people. And it was so successful that we maintain the Discord server as a year-round thing now, and it's a way that we maintain a filmmakers community. We have various channels for job boards and for upcoming events. There's a channel for filmmakers to post about what they're doing now and where their films have gone, awards they've won, other screenings at other festivals. So it's become a really great place for people to feel like they're still connected to the festival.
Right.
This year we're bringing back the pitch, which we didn't have last year. And right now we're exploring ways how we're going to present it. And again, technology is going to play a large role in that because part of it we're thinking is going to be live, in person, and part of it is going to be broadcast.
Fascinating. Thank you very much, Chris. And I find it fascinating that you were getting comments and really encouraging you're getting comments saying, this feels like a festival. That's pretty amazing. Not like a webinar.
Yeah, it was really great to have that feeling that there was something happening, that it wasn't just a VOD experience, because people can go to Netflix and do that. What makes a festival a festival? What makes us stand out? What value do we bring that people can't get through something like Netflix? And what we thought about is that we want to have live components. We want to have appointment viewing components, but we want to make them accessible to people so that they feel like there's a festival schedule. They have to be here at 2:30 p.m. on Wednesday in order to catch this Q&A. And they have to be at Thursday at 7 p.m. to catch this Q&A, right? So it gave them a sense of a festival schedule that they had to follow along with, and kind of guided their experience and guided their experience of the festival through something that was pre-planned, in addition to giving them the opportunity to consume the media the way they're accustomed to.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. And I'm going to flip back over to Pat, actually. I've got a couple questions for you, actually, 3 questions. And how encouraging is it to hear what these small not-for-profits and medium-sized businesses are doing to not skip a beat to continue to deliver culture from the perspective of the cultural emperor here in Toronto?
last one go, but let's pick up on what Chris said, because Chris just illustrated 3 phenomenal points about, I think, why, whether it be Real Asian or other Toronto not-for-profit arts organizations, largely succeeded. And the other one I'd throw out, like Real Asian, if anyone caught Global Toronto, Small World Music's online festival, yeah, to Chris, what Chris just said, totally didn't feel like you were attending a webinar. And it was amazing. But the 3 quick points that I caught from Chris too was, one, in the early days, we didn't really build for the medium. We put out content produced for another medium into the online environment. And then only later did we begin to work. And when I'm saying we, I'm speaking perhaps now of the city's offerings, because we have from everything from arts instruction classes to large scale events. But we got better about designing for digital. But immediately, and if folks ever tune into the Soft Revolution podcast with Ali Moen and Torkel Campbell, the most recent one is called Asleep on a Bed of Frozen Peas or something. It's with Ben Dici, but they talk about that. Like, what we were all doing was marketing, and that's fine. We had to keep brand visibility, and we had to, tell our audience we were there. That was fine, but let's not kid ourselves that it was all great digital content. But so I think that's a really important point. The second was this idea of mentorship that Chris touched on briefly. We saw 2 amazing examples. One, the crisis for organizations of scale created immediate opportunities of reverse mentorship. So the composition of our artistic leadership, not being digital natives, we're not really going to navigate easily through this crisis. So the best of them immediately pulled up talent who were digital natives, not exclusively on the tech side, but threaded throughout the and you had these new thought leaders pop up in organizations. I think that was a contributing factor, and not necessarily how arts institutions, particularly of scale, have historically functioned. So a phenomenal, maybe even perverse outcome. The other one, because we do community arts programming, but 80% of our audience are adults. If you think of the community arts centers outside the core and the demographics, we saw reverse mentorship in the form of our seniors arts class participants needed their children and grandchildren. So suddenly we had a multi-generational audience in our classes, and that was phenomenal. But we saw this collapsing of generations in the workplace and in the consumer environment, and that was phenomenal. And the last thing I'd say is with Chris's point about tech, yeah, we conceive of tech, and we here now, I'm talking as a funder, and in terms of categories of eligible expenses too, we conceive of tech too narrowly. It's not going to work unless you've got a continuum of research, and connectivity, the hardware, the software, and the training to sustain it and keep it all going. And I think that's a challenge for us, because the funding infrastructure to maintain the gains we've made is not yet there. It is still too clunky and more representative of trying to build a critical mass of hardware and perhaps some labor associated with it. But we've got to get better as funders and as an arts sector at advocating for what the true needs are to take advantage of this shift to digital.
And you mentioned funders, and another question that's popped up is, are there programs to assist artists and organizations to pivot to a more virtual presence, I guess, from the City of Toronto?
So I'll touch on 2. One, in the early days of the pandemic, we struck a deal with Shopify and Google, and we scaled a platform called Digital Main Street and produced a new program called Shop Here. So it was open to artists and and it remains, I shouldn't put it in the past tense, it remains open. So you get business consultation, you get a sell-through site built, you get subsidized access to the Shopify platform, and then sustainment obviously is something we all have to work on. So that's one, as we drive people online, and we really have to pay attention to consumer habits as we go from here, because we have just accelerated a decade of Canadians' reluctance to be e-commerce shoppers in a year. So we've got to watch where that goes in culture. The other side of it, we worked really closely with the Canada Council on the Digital Strategy Fund. So we were lucky to have started 3 years ago, and Toronto received fully 35% of round 1 and round 2. So we had made some good structural investments that allowed organizations of all different scale, all different discipline, all different audience to partner up and to begin to address things like audience analytics, stuff we've never done collaboratively. And when COVID hit, we had the platform to launch stuff like Arts at Home, letting arts organizations put content online on one unified platform, recognizing the immediate crisis of learning at home and parents wanting arts content to help while teaching the kids at home. So we need to, those are two programs that continue to run Digital Strategy Fund, but I really encourage anyone in the audience, particularly who's an individual artist or with a smaller arts organization, look at Shop Here, because it is a really good offering at no cost to you.
That's great. Thank you. And I'm sure people appreciate knowing that those resources exist. And just, I know, Pat, you're on a bit of a tight schedule here, and I've got before we move into final question for the panelists about the future, I'm going to put that to you because we have a question that just came to me. Tell us a little more about what Nuit Blanche 2021 is going to look like.
Right now, we are working with all of our partners to figure out exactly what Nuit Blanche is going to look like. Things are going I think, better than we might have anticipated in terms of our reopening. However, you need only look at Sydney, the UK, that it's not a foregone conclusion that we're out of this. Public gathering events and the concern around, if you're watching the Euros in Wembley Stadium, the real concern around super spreader events remains a big issue. So we're trying to figure out exactly what that means for us, and we'll have news in the upcoming days. Nuit, the city remains committed to it with all its partners. It's just a matter of figuring out how we work in these times. But when the conditions allow for us to bring 1.2 million people back downtown and now more than ever across the city, then we're going to be there, and we're going to promise you when the conditions allow the biggest Nuit we can give, maybe as we cap off the year of public art in 22.
Amazing. Thank you again, Pat. And listen, I know you're on a tight schedule. Stick around for as long as you can. I'm going to move to Chris now and ask you to tell us a little bit about kind of a bit of fortune telling here and premonition. What's in the future for Beanfield? What some of the stuff that we'd want to know about?
For Beanfield or for Relation?
Oh, I'm sorry, Todd.
I'm happy for Chris to take this question. Like, absolutely dive in there. This could be really fun.
You're all gonna get a chance. So Todd.
Well, for us, I mean, honestly, we obviously want to continue to support in the way that we do. We are, in terms of things like the digital divide, for example, we're working with the City of Toronto on Connect-TO, which is trying to get, much better and higher bandwidth capacity to a lot of underserved neighborhoods in the community. We talk about the digital divide, and we often talk about it as being between urban and rural, whereas in a city like Toronto, we actually have massive urban deserts where there just aren't enough suppliers to create the competition that's necessary. The problem, of course, is that, as I said, people still need to dig in the ground, and these things cost a lot of money. So one of the things we're focusing on is expanding the network that you mentioned before, William, and digging in the ground into, a lot of the areas that typically have been underserved. So whether that's northern Scarborough or northern Etobicoke, we're really aiming to kind of make sure that those communities have the access that we need. It takes time, obviously, to do this and to build the network. But in terms of that's exactly where we're going, so that hopefully it engages people in those communities to participate more in the arts, to participate more in the education around the arts. I think in one of our earlier conversations, I mentioned one of the great things that has come about because of this is, as an artist, it has kind of flattened a certain ability, if you have the digital accessibility, to work with some of the most amazing people around the world. As a vocalist, you can take lessons from some of the best on Broadway now. There's no way I could have ever done that 16 months ago. Like, it wouldn't even have been a consideration of mine. But now I can say, oh, wait a second, really? Like, they're giving lessons online and I can do this? That's cool. And so we're hoping to be able to get the connectivity into those neighborhoods so that more and more of the people can participate. Was that good, Chris? Was that good? Is that what we're planning?
Now I'll turn to Chris from Tangled, and you can talk now. No, Simone, I was just joking. So, calling everybody Chris now. Oh boy. So tell us a little bit about what the future holds at Tangled. You touched on it earlier, but we'd love to hear more.
Okay, Chris, you don't want to answer?
Okay. I'm not going to live this down, am I?
No. One thing I wanted to share was that it's going to answer your question. But what we've done is that we've partnered with El Alto Productions, and we've connected with the British Council and 17 Institute of Critical Studies in Mexico. And E-Alto is a review of arts and culture in the Americas. And so with Tangle driving the editorial framework for this edition around Turner Prize nominee Yinka Sobore's perspective that deaf and disability arts is the last remaining avant-garde movement. And we've created a publication that documents the disability artists and the cultural work and the contribution of that legacy. And so with that being said, it's because of who we are at Tangled and what we've done, like mentioned before, you can touch art and it's very tactile. It's critical that that we maintain that in some way. Many of Tangle's accessible curate practices involve touch and physically engaging work. And so I think that works interdependently with each other in connecting with the space digitally as well. And many of although they enjoyed the publications and the podcasts that we've, connected with, many of our artists and patrons are more interested in a safe return to the gallery rather than migrating exhibitions online. And so in response to that, we're planning to balance the two, the physical exhibition with a new digitally focused in mind. I hope that answers the question.
Well, it certainly answers one I had. Yes, I'm hoping to get back. I'm looking for a safe return to Tangled. So I really am looking forward to that. I think a lot of us are. Now, would the real Chris stand up and answer that question as well? What's the future hold for Real Asian, and what can we expect?
Well, this year is our 25th anniversary. So we were really hoping to get back into in-person festivals, but we have made the decision to present digitally online again this year. We have a bunch of partnerships that are happening in the real world. With Toronto Outdoor Picture Show coming up on August 5th, and with Drive-In TO, which is a great program that the city has provided, on August 24th. So there will be opportunities for people to gather in real life in response to our 25th anniversary programming. We have... I think that what we've discovered about online programming is we can reach more audiences in more places than ever before. It's also caused us to examine with more care and intention how we deal with disability practices. So we've been engaging with the deaf and hard of hearing communities. We have engaged with Toronto Sign Language Interpretation Services to provide ASL interpretation for all of our live Q&As. And they were so impressed to be brought in early on in the planning process that they contributed a special trailer for the deaf community for our 2020 festival, which was really amazing to see, because it's one thing to provide access. But if you're not marketing to that community, how are people going to know about it? So we needed TSLIS to help us bridge that communication gap with the deaf and hard of hearing communities who would be interested in our programming. And we found a really good response rate back from that community saying that, it's lovely to be reached out to, not just served, but reached out to. And in the past, our dealings with disability have mainly involved mobility impairment, people in wheelchairs, people with walkers and assistive devices. But we never really encountered or considered the audience needs for people who are MAD and people who are neurodiverse, people who are deaf or hard of hearing, people who have low vision, who are unsighted, people who are blind. So reaching out in the digital sphere allows us to take into more careful consideration how we reach out to these disability groups. So we're working on, we actually received digital strategy funds from the city to create a program called Codes of Contact, which is a incubation workshop for organizations across the country to work on accessibility issues, not just for the disabled community, but also to help bridge the digital divide of how do we address inequities in digital access. So these are things that we plan to continue throughout the future. And even if we get to a point where the communities we serve feel comfortable gathering in a crowded theater again, we still think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for online presentation. And we plan to work that into our future plans going forward. It's not just something that is a response to the pandemic. It might have started that way, but it's something I think that we want to continue on with even after this pandemic is over.
Thanks very much, Chris. That was really informative. And we're at we got 3 minutes left, and I've been monitoring the questions that I've been getting, and you've really done a great job of covering off all of the questions. The last one that came through was about audience, and so thank you, Chris, for talking about that. And I think we're good in terms of the Q&A, and maybe if I can take the next couple of minutes just to thank you again for being here and for participating and sharing all of this amazing, energizing information with us. And we look forward to participating in all the ways that we can with all four of you. But it's interesting because I was just making some notes as we were going. It's interesting. I mean, overall theme really is that real life and digital are going to coexist moving forward. And so Beanfield, there's no chance you're going to go out of business. So there we go. And I think that we've all learned a lot over the last 16 months, stuff that we never thought we'd want to learn. I learned how to teach on Zoom, which is something I never thought I'd be able to do. And the other is partnerships. It seems to me that that's really the one of the underlying important themes is everybody working together. And that, it's really encouraging because we got a lot of stuff done successfully over 16 months of what was the most adverse conditions for the cultural community, any community, but for us, our perspective is culture. And I think that even the discussion here has highlighted how much interconnectedness there is. I mean, the fact that Beanfield's working with the city, Beanfield supplies connectivity to Tangled and to Relation. I mean, the fact that you're a major supporter of 401, allowing us to make these things happen. So that interconnectedness is really profound and really encouraging to see that we are working in this together and building, again, those partnerships more profoundly. So I'm just going to wrap things up. I got 1 minute, and then we're right on time. But once again, thanks to Beanfield. You guys do such a great job. Always, we are constantly reminded that it wouldn't be possible, the things that we're doing at 401, without your infrastructure and support. And I'd like to just acknowledge our participants today. And I think we've got another slide that'll give us all of your social media handles, because if you're not following these guys, you should be. And here you go. And, doing terrific work, as you can, as we've discovered over the course of this discussion, lots of exciting stuff happening in the future. And we really look forward to participating in all of that. And from me, just to wind it right down, again, I'm William Huffman, and it's always a thrill to participate in this way, to hear about all of the encouraging stuff that's happening at 401 Richmond Street and all of the Richmond Street stakeholders, even beyond the building, who the 401 Richmond Street stakeholders beyond the building, who enrich and liven all of the stuff that goes on in the building. So listen, I think we're about done, and have a terrific rest of your Wednesday. And we shall see you back here soon, because lots more programming will be coming through the 401 Richmond Street YouTube channel. So please visit again.